to ensure that this awful incident does not cause division.
Let's talk now to Rachel Shabi, who's a journalist and author specialising in the Middle East. A very good afternoon to you. So we've heard there from the Archbishop of Canterbury, from the leaders of Muslim groups. We've also heard from the Prime Minister and the Mayor of London, of course, in the last couple of days, all with a very similar message, saying that this attack has nothing to do with Islam, that it's a betrayal, an insult to Islam, and that communities need to stick together. How important do you think that message is in trying to prevent any kind of backlash?
Those messages are critical at the moment. I mean, what we're seeing is an increase in support on Facebook, if not on the street, for far-right racist organisations. And that is terrible, but to some extent it's predictable and it's visible. But what is more worrying, what I find more worrying, is the kind of messages we're seeing amongst people who would consider themselves more liberal-minded, where there has been a real conflation of terms such as Islamism and terrorism, so that they all, come to mean the same thing. And to me, I mean, I'm Jewish, secular, and to me that's a bit like saying that people who are, violent settlers, Jewish settlers in the West Bank, who say they act in the name of God, mean that all religious Jews are violent. I mean, it's that nonsensical and that offensive. But I think what's happened in the UK is that perhaps, because we are such a secular society, we tend not to understand that people's relationship to religion can take so many different forms. I mean, it can go from personal relationship to various shades of politics and then travel along a very long road before it gets down to the sort of minority extreme view that uses religion to justify violence. And what we're seeing now is an attempt to just collapse that entire spectrum into one thing, whereby Islam is something to be feared. And that's something that I think we need to be really vigilant about and really on guard against in the coming days.
And Rachel, I understand that we do have a picture that's been given to us of Lee Rigby with his son, and so touching to see photographs like this and images of this young man who has obviously been cut down in the prime of his life, and it's moved a huge number of people. I mean, do you feel ultimately optimistic that the general feeling of revulsion that's been felt at what happened to this poor young man will actually pull the country together in the kind of way that everyone would want to see?
I think the sort of unity and courage that we've seen coming out of Woolwich is definitely inspiring and should be played on repeat to kind of galvanise enthusiasm and optimism. But I also think we need to be really careful not to single out or make the Muslim community in Britain responsible or somehow accountable, put the onus on them and the kind of you sort it out, because, this is a collective problem and we need to have a collective shared approach. And one of the things that we can do in that shared approach is actually to own up to the obvious correlation between British foreign policy and the violence that we've seen on our streets in the last few days. And in fact, British security officials have been for some time warning about the consequences of British foreign policy in the Middle East and the kind of repercussion that it would have on British soil. And I think it's really important that we have that conversation openly and honestly, because if we don't, then that conversation will go elsewhere and it will be used as fuel by extremists.
Is now the time to have that conversation? The government has made it very clear, hasn't it, that nothing justifies an attack like this?
Well, there's a very big difference between justification and understanding. There's, of course, no justification for any sort of act of terror. But, we do need to listen to the justifications. And if a woman in Woolwich is brave enough to stand and talk to an armed killer and ask him why he did it, then we need to be brave enough right now to listen to what his answer is.
OK, Rachel Shabi, very interesting to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for your time this afternoon. So two stories concerning airlines today that we want to talk to our guest, David Learmount, who's here with me in the studio now. David Learmount, we're going to ask you about the flight